Very good morning, students. In this session, we're just going to revise the topic, whatever we discussed in Geographic Information System earlier. Unit-wise, we're just going to discuss the topic, and I believe that this revision will help you people for your preparation for your semester exam, MCQ-based semester exam. Okay, straight away we can just go for the revision. In Unit 1, the first thing what we have learned is we just learned about what is Geographic Information System. So, Geographic Information System is nothing but a tool which allows you to capture the spatial data, manipulate the spatial data, analyze the spatial data, and also to visualize the spatial data. So, this GIS tool will allow you to do all these tasks. It allows you to capture, manipulate, analyze, store and visualize the spatial data. Okay, so first you should be very clear about this. The next topic is components of GIS. In GIS, we have 5 main components. It starts from data. We have software, hardware, methods and people. First, let us start with data. So, data is a very important component in Geographic Information System. Whenever we say data in Geographic Information System, it refers to 2 types of data. One is spatial data and other one is non-spatial data. Spatial data means any data which is associated with some location, which is associated with some geographic location, is what referred as spatial data. And non-spatial data means it will not be associated with any geographic location. Okay, so that is what non-spatial data. Sometimes non-spatial data may be also referred as attribute data. The reason why it is referred as attribute data is usually the non-spatial data we will be storing in only in a relational database, that too in the form of tables. That's why it is referred as attribute data. So right now we are discussing about the data. In GIS, we will be using both spatial data and also non-spatial data. The next comes software. Only through this software we will be capturing, we will be manipulating, we will be visualizing. The software will allows us to do all these tasks. The next comes hardware, and this hardware component will allow you to capture the data. So, if you want to capture, either you can capture through some cameras, okay, or you may have some hardwares to collect the spatial data. So, hardware's role is also very important in our Geographic Information System. And next component is your methods. So, every organization will have their own objective of using GIS. If you take a weather forecasting organization, their objective is different. If you take a logistic organization, their objective will be different. So, based on the objective, the method will be varying. So, for what purpose they are using GIS? So, that is what method is. And the last component is people. People role is also very important in GIS because they will be assisting in all the roles. They will be assisting in all the roles of a GIS. Let it be capturing the spatial data or doing analysis or interpreting some information. So, people's role is also very important. So, these are the 5 components in a Geographic Information System. Okay. So, the next topic is coordinate system. So, coordinate system is nothing but a reference system using which we can just locate every location in a common framework. Okay. So coordinate system is a reference system used to represent the location of geographic features within a common framework. Okay. So the main point what you have to take is the geographic, when you refer to coordinate system, there are two types of coordinate systems. One is geographic coordinate system, another one is projected coordinate system. The main difference is, as you could see in the slide, the geographic coordinate system is a three-dimensional representation, whereas projected coordinate system is two-dimensional representation. Okay, so that's the main difference. Okay. Sometimes the geographic coordinate system is also referred as global coordinate system. Okay, fine. Then you should also be clear with certain terms. You can expect this in some questions. The first thing is datum. Datum is a reference point which is used for locating every positions in the globe. It's a reference point. Only based on this reference, you will be locating all the positions in the earth or the globe. So it's a reference point. The next one is you should be aware of latitude and longitude. Before latitude and longitude, you should also know about prime meridian and equator. Probably you might have studied earlier. Equator is a reference line which will be splitting our earth into two halves vertically. Okay. Sorry. Your equator is a reference line which will be splitting our globe into two halves horizontally. Horizontally will be just splitting into two halves. Okay, so this is what equator. Okay, and what about prime meridian? So prime meridian will be splitting our earth into two halves vertically. Okay, so this is prime meridian and this is equator. The reason why we discussed about prime meridian and equator is the lines, the latitude refers to the reference line that is drawn parallel to equator. Now this reference line is what called as latitude, and those reference line which is drawn parallel to prime meridian is what called as longitude. Okay, so this is latitude. The lines which is drawn parallel to equator is what referred as latitude, and the line which is drawn parallel to prime meridian is what? Longitude. Okay, so this is what latitude and longitude. Just for an example, you can just see here the geographic location of Chennai is 13 degree 4 minute and 2.7804 seconds north. Okay, and 80 degree 14 minutes 15.4212 seconds east. Now you could see there are two values is there. Okay, 13 degree 4 minute 2.7 seconds north and 80 degree 14 minutes 15.4212 second east. Now what is this? For any value, if it is been added with either north or south, it means that that value is nothing but latitude. Okay, so it means that if they say it is north, it means that it is above equator. If they say south, it means that it is below your equator. Okay, I will repeat the point. So north means above the equator and south means below the equator. Similarly, any value which is been added with either east or west, it means that is longitude. Okay, So here since it is east means it is to the right side of prime meridian. If it is west means to the left side of prime meridian. So that's it. Okay. So you should be clear with latitude and longitude. Based on this you may get some questions. Fine. Then there are a few operations, probably you can also expect some question, that is conversion operation, projection operation and transformation operation. Transformation operation means, now we have seen that there are two types of coordinate system, that is geographic coordinate system and other one is projected coordinate system. In geographic coordinate system itself you have different coordinate systems. In projected coordinate system itself you have some coordinate systems available. Okay. Now the point is, if you transform from one coordinate system to another coordinate system of same type, say for example you are transforming from one coordinate system of geographic coordinate system type to another form of geographic coordinate system type, then that operation is what called as transformation. Or if you transform from one coordinate system of projected coordinate system type to another coordinate system of projected coordinate system type, then that is also referred as transformation. Suppose if you transform from, or if you convert from geographic coordinate system type to projected coordinate system type, that is what called as projection. Suppose if you are converting from projected coordinate system to geographic coordinate system, that is referred as conversion. So have a note of these three operations. You can expect some question from this. Okay, fine. And these are the few examples of geographic information system softwares: GrassGIS, Saga, Geoda, QGIS. Okay, so these are some geographic information system softwares. Okay, so out of this almost all the softwares whatever that is been listed in the slide are free open source softwares. Okay, and there is one popular proprietary software, that is ArcGIS. So regarding application we will be discussing in the 5th unit. Okay, so and the last topic is levels of measurement. These levels of measurements are related with your attribute data. Okay, say for example you have a field. Now in that field, how you are just going to have the value, or what type of value you are just going to have. So that is what type of measurements. There are 4 types of measurements: nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio. Nominal means they are just labels. I will give some example. Assume that you have a field like type of crop cultivated in a particular land. So type of crop, what possible value you may have? You may have like vegetable crop or fruits crop, just for example I am telling, or rice, like that. Now what are the possible values you have? You have values like vegetable, fruits, rice, etc. Now these are just labels. When you say vegetable, when you say fruits, when you say rice, they are just labels. Probably we may have discussed one example earlier. You assume that you have a field like your hair color. You have a field like hair color. So what possible value you may have? You may have values like black, brown, blue, like that. Now these black, brown, blue are just labels. They are just labels, that's it. They don't have any orderings. They are not having any priority associated with it. They are just labels. So that is what nominal type is. The next type is ordinal. Ordinal means, as the name says, it has some order associated with it. Assume that you have a field like class, degree class. What possible value we may have? We may have values like first class, second class, third class, like that. These first class, second class, third class are not just labels. When you say first class, it means that it is in the top. When you say third class, it means that it is in the bottom. So they have some orders associated with it. So such type of value is what called as ordinal. And the third type is interval. Interval means you will be having value for this field between a range, okay, from some value to some value. So you will be having values between a range. Okay, so the next one, ratio, is also very similar to of your interval, where you will be having values between a range. But the difference between interval and ratio is, in interval if you say 0, it means that 0 is also a value. The 0 don't have the real meaning of 0. What is the real meaning of 0? When I say 0 students are attending my class, what does it mean? It means that no student is attending my class. So 0, normally it represents absence. Is it or what? But in interval if you say 0, it means that 0 is also a value. A very good example is a temperature, a person's temperature. So when we say person's temperature, if we say 0 degrees Celsius, what does it mean? It is also a temperature. It doesn't mean that the temperature is not existing. Temperature exists and the temperature value is 0 degree. But whereas in a ratio, if you say 0, it means that it is absence of that value or absence of something. If you say the height of the person as 0, what does it mean? The person is not there. If I say 0 students are attending my class, what does it mean? It means that no students are attending my class. So that's about the types of measurements. Okay, so these are the topics you have to concentrate in your first unit. Okay, so the next second unit. In second unit, first of all, you should be clear with data models. Data models is a base for any database system. Is a base for any data storage. Okay, in our database management system subject itself, we have learned some data models. We have learned data model like relational data model, entity relationship model, object based model. Like that we have discussed different models. Okay, so those are the data models for database system. Okay, to have a quick recap, there is a data model called entity relationship model. Shortly it is referred as ER model. Whenever we want to design a database, then we will be going with ER model. In ER model, we will be drawing a diagram, and that diagram is what called as ER diagram. Okay, so you just have a small revision about this ER diagram. You can also expect some question based on this ER diagram. Okay, in the slide you can just see a sample ER diagram. Just see here, you have a entity set called client, you have entity set called messaging, you have entity set called reports, and relationship set called subscribe to, provide, like that. Okay, so entity set, relationship set, and these are what called as the oval symbol represents attributes. Okay, so whenever some attribute is been underlined, it means that is a key attribute. So for this entity set, service ID is a key attribute. For client ID is a key attribute. And similarly for reports, report ID is a key attribute. Okay, and these 1m, these are nothing but cardinalities, mapping cardinalities. You have mapping cardinality like 1 to 1, 1 to many, many to 1, many to many, like that you have different cardinalities. Okay, fine. So that's about your ER diagram or ER model. The next comes your relational model. Relational model is a very, very important model. The reason is the database system, whatever that is currently available, mostly they are based on this ER model. Mostly they are based on relational model. The concept of relational model is storing the information in the form of tables. As you could see in the slide, you have stored information about a student called Alex. You have stored a student information called Maria, Maya, Bob, Newton. So whenever you store some information, you will be storing in the form of tables. Okay. Now in this, every individual row is also referred as tuples. T-U-P-L-E, tuples. Okay, fine. So these are the data model for database management systems. Now what about the data models for our spatial data? For our spatial data, we have two data models. One is vector data model and other one is raster data model. In vector data model, we will be storing the spatial objects by using either points or by using lines or by using polygons. Only by using these three components you will be storing the spatial data in your vector data model. Whereas in a raster data model, you will be storing the spatial data by using set of grids. As you could see in the slide, you have set of grids. Only by using the set of grids you will be storing the spatial data. Hope it is clear for you. Now you could see that here you are representing some information. The blue color represents some other information and white color represents some other information. So like this, by using set of grids, you will be representing you will be storing the spatial data. Okay, fine. Now probably you can recall this information. Since we are storing the spatial data in your raster data model by using set of grids, the memory consumption will be more. The memory consumption of your raster data model will be more. That's the reason why we need compression. Because when you store a spatial data, just assume that you are just storing only one information, the location of a particular city. Even if you store only one information, that should be also stored only by using set of grids. So obviously it is going to take some memory. The memory consumption is, that's why the memory consumption of your raster data model is very high. So if you want to go with the raster data model, then what you have to do is we have to compress the data. We have to compress the raster data. Okay. So whenever we say compression, there can be two type of compression. One is lossy compression and other one is lossless compression. As the name says, lossy means there may be some loss because of your compression. And lossless means even if you compress your data and if you uncompress it, you will be getting the original data. That is lossless. Okay, fine. So there are four different compression techniques available for compressing your raster data. The first one is run length encoding. Okay, so here what you will be doing is you will be storing the information line by line. Just for example, just see here, value 0 is stored in all the 8 cells. Then 0 is stored in the first 4 cell, then 1 stored in the next 3 cells and 0 stored in 1 cell. Like that, you will be storing the information row wise. Okay, and you will not be storing that all the information. Instead, what value you have in all the cells, that value you will be storing along with the number of cells in which you have that the value. I'll repeat the point once again. Here if you say 0, 8, it means that the value 0 is being stored in 8 cells. The next row you are saying that 0 is being stored in 4 cells. So 0 is being stored in 4 cells. Next 1 is being stored in 3 cells. Next 0 is being stored in 1 cell, like that. So row wise you will be storing it. Okay. So this is what run length encoding. The next comes block coding. In block coding you will be storing the information block wise. Okay, how many blocks you have and what is the starting point of the block and what is the size of the block. So you will be just storing that information. Okay, here if you see this, a block with size as 9, you have a block, and how many such block you have only one such block. And what is the coordinate of the block? 5, 2. The starting position of the block is 5, 2, fifth column, second row. Okay. The next one is block with size 4. So how many blocks you have? You have 2 such blocks. And what is the coordinate of the block? What is the starting position of the block? 4, 5, 6, 5. Like that. So you will be just storing as a blocks. So that is block coding. And the next one is chain coding. In chain coding you will be just storing only the boundaries. Okay, you are just storing only the boundaries. Say for example, the starting point is 5, 2, then east 3, south 4, west 1, south 1, west 1, north 1, west 1, north 3, east 1, then again north 1. So you will be just storing only the boundary. Okay, so this is another way of compressing your spatial data. And the last compression technique is your quadtree encoding. In quadtree encoding, what you will be doing is you will be representing the spatial data whatever you have in your raster file in the form of tree. Say for example, you have a raster layer with you, as you could see in this screen. Now this is the raster layer we have. Now we will be storing this raster file in the form of tree. The concept is very simple. You have to split that file into 4 parts. Okay, so you could notice an yellow line. So we are just splitting the raster file into 4 parts. So now you have 0, 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now in the first part, since you have the same white color in all the cells, let us assume that white color represents some information, green color represents some information. Okay, fine. So since you have white color in all the cells of the first part, you are representing by using a leaf node, and the information what you had in all the cells, the white color. What about the second cell, second part? There also, in second part also you have the same value in all the cells. So again you are just storing it by means of a leaf node with that white color. The third child or the third part also have the same value in all the cells. So again what you are doing, you are just storing by using, or you are just representing by using a leaf node with white color in it. What about the fourth part? In fourth part you don't have the same value in all the cells. In some cell you have green color and in some cell you have white color. So what you have to do, what we did initially, the same thing you have to do for this part. What we did initially, we splitted the entire layer into 4 parts. Now the same thing you have to do for this part. You have to split this into 4 parts. Since you are splitting into 4 parts, you have to represent as a subtree. Earlier we have represented by using leaf nodes, but here you are representing as a subtree. Okay, you are representing as a parent node. Now what we have to do? Now for this parent node, you should have 4 childs. Okay, the reason is we have splitted this part itself as 4 parts. Now in the first part, since you have the same value in all the cells, you are representing by using a leaf node, that too with the value whatever you have in the all the cells what have green color. So that information you are just storing here. Now what about the next child? The next child we don't have the same value in all the cells. So again what you have to do? Whatever we did earlier, the same thing you have to do it here. Again split this part into 4 parts. Okay, so when you split it, in first part you have white color, so represent as a leaf node. Second part you have white color, so represent by using a leaf node. Third part you have green color, represented it by using a leaf node. And the last part again represent as a leaf node. Okay, so like this you have to represent. So this is what referred as quad-tree encoding, right? So far we discussed about raster data model, and also we discussed about raster data compression. The next comes your vector data model. As we already discussed, in vector data model you will be representing the spatial data by using 3 entities, either by using points or by using lines or by using polygons. Okay, fine. Now let us discuss some examples. Now assume that this is your spatial data. This is your spatial data. Now how to represent this spatial data in our vector model, vector data model? First you will be storing the points. Okay, here you have a point 1, you have a point 8, you have a point 7, you have a point 6. So whichever points you have, that you will be storing in a point directory file. The points you will be just storing it, that is what we are referring as point directory file. The next thing is you will be storing the lines. Okay, whenever you store points, you will be storing by using its coordinate, xy coordinate. And for lines, you will be representing which are the points meant for that line. Say for example, you have a line called H. You have a line called H. So for the line H, which are the points meant for it? You have a line called A. So for that line A, which are the nodes meant for that? You have a point called 1 and you have a point called 2. Okay, node, point, both are same. So first you have to store the points, then you have to store the lines, then you have to store the polygons. And finally, if you want to store some information for each polygon, that you can just store it here. Say for example, you have a polygon called 101. For 101, which are the lines meant for it? A, I, M, L, H. So that you are just storing here. And later you can just store for what purpose this 101 is used. This 101 is used for representing the car parking. So that you can just store it here. Okay, so to have a recap, in vector data model, first you will be storing points, and using that point you will be storing lines, and using that line you will be storing the polygons. Okay, so this slide is very, very important from your exam point of view, the comparison between a vector data model and a raster data model. Your vector data model is usually complex. It is very difficult for performing the overlay operation, and high spatial variability is inefficiently expressed. The file size is very small, and this vector model is suitable only for representing the discrete features with definable boundaries. So it is the right choice if you are going to store only some discrete informations. What about raster? It is very simple actually. Since you are using only set of grids, it is very simple. It is very efficient for performing the overlay operation. High spatial variability is efficiently expressed, but the file size is very large, and we can go with a raster data model for representing continual spatial informations. Say for example, you have a farmland, you have a mountain. So like that, if you have some continuous informations, then you can go with raster data model. Okay, so these are the comparisons about your vector and raster data model. The next comes your TIN model. Whenever we want to store some elevation details, say for example, you have a mountain with you, now you want to store that mountain. So whenever we want to store elevation details, then it is not possible for us to go with the models whatever we discussed earlier, the vector data model and raster data model. Those models are not capable of storing the elevation details. So we have to go with a model called digital elevation model, DEM. So DEM is a model meant for storing the elevation details, and triangular irregular network is a type of DEM. When I say triangular irregular network is a type of DEM, it means that TIN is used for storing the elevation details. Okay, so using TIN you can just store the elevation details. The concept of TIN is very simple. You have to say for example, in a layer you are going to store some elevation details. So what you have to do is, in that layer you have to randomly identify the points. Then using that point you have to form triangles. After forming triangle, you have to draw a circle. Once if you draw a circle, in that circle you should have only the 3 points meant for that particular triangle. I will repeat the point once again, students. In that layer, whichever you are going to use for storing the elevation detail, in that layer you have to construct random points. After identifying the random points, you have to form triangle using any 3 points. After forming the triangles, you have to draw the circle over all the triangles. In all the triangles, each circle should have only the 3 points meant for forming the triangle. If you have any other points in that particular circle, then it means that the triangles whatever you have formed is not suitable for representing the elevation detail. In that case, again you have to re-identify the points, then triangles, then again you have to do the job continuously. Okay, so you have to do this process until each and every circles have only the 3 points for the triangle. This condition is what called as Delaunay criteria. Okay, fine. The one point what you have to take is, now in the left side you can just see an elevation detail, and how you are representing by using TIN, that you can just see it here. The point you have to take from this particular slide is, more the elevation detail you have, so here you have more elevation detail, more the elevation you have, more the triangles you will be having. Less the elevation you have, less the triangle you will be having in your TIN model. Hope the point is clear for you. Okay, and the last topic is Open Geospatial Consortium. This is an organization which is meant for establishing the standards related with geographic information system. Probably you may be getting questions like what are the standards they have given, what are the standards given by the Open Geospatial Consortium. So based on that you may get some questions. So there is a standard called Web Map Service, Web Mapping Service. This is one standard given by OGC, Open Geospatial Consortium. And similarly you have spatial data infrastructure. So that is also another standard given by Open Geospatial Consortium. And also you have GML, Geographic Markup Language. So these are the standards given by OGC, main standards. They are given many standards, but these are the main standards given by Open Geospatial Consortium. Okay, fine. So next we are just going to discuss about the third unit. The first topic in our third unit is the topic is about a scanner and digitizer. Whenever you have the spatial data in a paper or in some hard copy, you have to take it to the GIS system. You have to take it to the geographic information system. Only then you can process it and you can visualize it. So how to take the spatial data, whatever we have in a paper, to the GIS? So either you can take it through scanning or you can take it through digitizing. So scanner is a hardware using which what you can do is you can just scan the data whatever you have in the paper. Once if you scan, what happens? It just taken to the system. But the point you have to remember is whenever you perform the scanning operation, the spatial data whatever we had in the paper, it will be stored in the form of raster. The output of scanning operation will be an raster file. In your system, raster file will be get created. Whereas when you digitize it, when you digitize the spatial data whatever you have in the paper, the spatial data will be taken to your system in the form of vector. This difference is very important. You can expect this in some questions. So scanning result will be a raster and digitizing result will be in the form of vector. Okay, so hope it is clear for you. There are different type of scanners available, so have a glance. Then you just also remember few file formats. If you take raster, the main file formats are a TIFF format, GeoTIFF format, then IMG format. Okay, so these are the raster file formats. Okay, and if you take your vector file format, the shape format is a very popular format of vector data file. SHP format, shape format. In addition to shape format, you also have JSON format, GeoSN format, GML format. Okay, fine. Then about digitizing, I already told you that whatever you have in paper, you can just by using the pointer like device, you can just digitize spatial data whatever you have in the paper. Once if you digitize it, it will be recorded in the form of vector file. There are different types of digitizing available: manual digitizing, heads up digitizing, automated digitizing. Okay, so you just remember this types of mode in which you can perform the digitizing job. Either you can go with point mode or you can go with stream mode. When you go with point mode, whenever you are digitizing, you will be just identifying only the points. You will be just digitizing only the points. You will be just marking only the points. So based on the points whatever you have identified, the arcs will be automatically formed. Whereas in stream mode, you will be drawing the arcs. Based on the curve in the arcs, automatically points will be constructed. Points will be identified. Point mode and stream mode. If you are new to digitizing, then you will be going with the point mode. Suppose if you are an expert in digitizing, then you can go with stream mode. Okay. The next very important topic is topology. Whenever we want to represent the spatial relationship, then we can go with topology. So topology is a mathematical representation of physical relationship that exists between the geographical elements. there are three main components of topology. The first one is connectivity component, containment component, and contiguity component. Okay, so connectivity component means it is also referred as arc node topology. Whenever we want to store some arcs, whenever you want to store some lines, you will be storing it by means of points. Okay, so this is what we discussed now second unit itself. You will be storing the lines by means of points. You will be storing the polygons by means of lines. Okay, so that is what the second component called containment component, polygon arc topology. You will be storing the polygons by means of arcs. And the third component is contiguity component. So whenever you represent any arcs, you will be also representing what are the polygon that is available in the left side and also what are the polygon that is available in the right side. So that information also you will be storing it. So this component is what? Contiguity component. Okay, remember that these components we are discussing or we are using in topology just to represent the spatial relationship or the relationship between the spatial elements. Okay, then we have different rules. Students, kindly go through all the rules. Based on these rules, definitely you will be getting some questions. Before going for the rules, I should highlight this point. The reason why we are going for polygon, of course, to represent the relationship between the spatial elements, we are just going for topology. But in addition to that, you can eliminate these errors when you go with topology. Slivers, you can just eliminate it. Slivers, as everyone knows, slivers are nothing but small polygons that will be generated in our spatial data. So once if you go with topology, these slivers will be eliminated. And similarly, dangling nodes will be also eliminated. Dangling node means some points or line going or extending to some more location. That is what referred as dangles. So even for eliminating dangles, we can go with topology. And also undershoot, overshoot, even that can be eliminated by using topology. Okay, so these are the reasons, additional reasons why we are going for topology. Now the rules. There are many consistency rules available, and these consistency rules are categorized into three types. The consistency rules related with points, first category. Consistency rule related with lines, second category, and consistency rules related with polygons. This is third category. Okay. So as a name says, when you say that particular rule is in point category, what does it mean? That rule, that consistency rule can be applied only for points. If a rule is available in polygon category, it means that that particular consistency rule can be applied only for polygons. Okay, that is it. So kindly go through these rules. Definitely based on this rule, you will be getting some questions. Okay. Okay, the next point is how to link the spatial data with the attribute data. You can link the spatial data with attribute data by assigning unique IDs. Okay, here in this image you can just see you have an attribute data here and you have a spatial data here. How you are relating this with this? By assigning unique ID. By assigning unique ID, you can relate spatial data with the attribute data. Okay, and the last topic is ODBC, Open Database Connectivity. What is the role of Open Database Connectivity? Whenever we want our application or a program to interact with the database system, we can make use of the ODBC. ODBC is nothing but an interface through which our program can interact with the database system. Okay, The main component of your ODBC is ODBC driver and driver manager. Okay, they are very important components. Now, if you want your program, or if you want your application to interact with the database system, you have to follow certain steps. What are the steps? First, you have to load the ODBC driver. Then you have to establish a connection. Then you have to open the connection. After opening the connection, then you have to prepare and execute the SQL statement, whatever you want to execute. As everyone knows, if you want to interact with the database system, you can interact only by means of the structured query language, SQL. Okay, so prepare and execute SQL. Then once after executing the SQL, you will be getting some results. If you want to process the result, you can just process it. And then you have to close your connection. That should be the last step. So these steps you have to follow when you want your application to interact with database system using ODBC API. Okay. And the last topic is GPS, Global Positioning System. So as everyone knows, Global Positioning System is used for providing three services: positioning service, navigation service, and timing service. So three services are provided by the GPS system. How these services are being provided? There are three segments available. Of course, it is an US owned system. There are three segments available: space segment or satellite segment, then control segment, and the third segment is user segment. Okay, so satellite segment, in satellite segment what happens is, around our globe or around our earth, there are 6 orbits available. In each orbit, 4 operational satellites will be roaming around the globe. I'll repeat the point once again. Around the globe, 6 orbits are being formed. Only in this orbit, the satellites will be roaming around the globe. Now, as I said, 6 orbits are there. 6 operational orbits are there. 6 orbits are there, and in each orbit, 4 satellites will be roaming, operational satellites. So totally 24 operational satellites will be roaming around the globe, and these satellites are responsible for providing the services. So this is about your satellite segment, and the second segment is control segment. As the name says, this segment is responsible for controlling the satellites which is roaming around the globe. Okay, so you have master control station, you have antennas, like that. You have different units available in the control segment, which is meant for controlling the movement of satellite. And the last segment is user. So through the GPS device, they can just avail the PNT service, positioning, navigation, and timing service. Okay, so these are the 3 components. Okay, fine. In the 4th unit, we will be discussing about data analysis. So actually, in 4th unit, we have going to discuss about different operations, but if you prepare it in this way, it will be very comfortable. It will be very comfortable for you. Operations related with vector data and operation related with raster data. Okay, so even in my class, I might have discussed only in this way. So first, let us discuss about the operations that can be done on vector data. Okay, so in vector data, you can perform the operations like buffering, overlay, distance measurement, pattern analysis, and feature manipulation. Okay, so what about buffering? Buffering means nothing but you are just finding the area within a particular distance. Say for example, you have 2 points here. So around these 2 points, you are just finding the area. Okay, normally this buffering operation is used for identifying the buffer zones, and these buffer zones will be helpful for us to take some critical decisions. Okay, fine. So that is what buffering, and you have some variation in buffering also. Then comes your overlay operation. Overlay means you have 2 layers, you have 2 vector data layers. Of course, these 2 vector data layers are spatially registered. What does the term spatially registered refers to? They should refer to same location. In one layer, if you have Chennai data, in second layer also you should have the same Chennai data. Only then you can perform the overlay operation. In one layer, if you have Chennai data, in another layer, if you have Tirupati data, you cannot perform the overlay operation. Okay, probably you can get some question based on this. Whenever you are performing overlay operation, you have to take care of 2 conditions. Only if 2 conditions get satisfied, you can perform the overlay operation. The first condition is both the layers should be spatially registered, and the second condition is both the layers should be in same coordinate system. Only if these 2 conditions get satisfied, you can go with overlay operation. Okay, now just see here, you have one spatial data here and another spatial data here, one layer and another layer. Of course, these 2 layers are spatially registered. Assume that they are spatially registered. Now once if you perform overlay operation, what happens? So whatever you have in both the layers, that will be just performed, that will be just combined. Okay, if you couldn't get the real meaning of this, I can give some example. Assume that this is Tirupati city's climate data, or Tirupati city area, and this is Chennai city area. Okay, so one represents Tirupati and two represents Chennai. Now A and B are representing the climate details of South India. Climate details of South India. Okay. Now, when you take South India, it covers other cities also. Is it or not? But you are interested only in Tirupati and Chennai. So you are just going with overlay operation. So once if you perform overlay operation, what happens? In Tirupati itself, you have one A information. One represents Tirupati, A represents climate, and B represents another type of climate. Say for example, A is heavy rainfall and B is slight rainfall. So in some portion of Tirupati you will be getting heavy rainfall, and in some portion you will be getting less rainfall. Similarly, in Chennai, some portion you will be getting heavy rainfall, in some portion you will be getting light rainfall. So this is what overlay operation is. And this point you should be very clear. Whenever you perform overlay operation in one layer, if you have a point, and in another layer if you have a polygon, then in the resultant overlay operation you will be having only points. I will make it clear. Whenever you perform overlay operation between two layers, in the result you will be getting the lower dimensional one. In one layer if you have point, in another layer if you have line, then the result you will be getting only point, because point is the lower dimension one. The next one, if you take the hierarchy, the top you will be having polygon, next you will be having a line, then followed by you will be having point. So which is the lower dimensional one? Point. Which is higher dimensional one? Polygon. So coming back to the point, whenever you perform the overlay operation between between point and polygon, the result will be point. Whenever you perform overlay operation between line and polygon, the result will be line. Suppose if you performing overlay operation between point and point, result will be also point. Line and line, again result will be line. Polygon and polygon, again the result will be polygon. Okay, so be clear with this. Okay. And overlay method. So here what we are discussing, we are discussed about intersection. Intersection means whichever if you have some information that is common in both or whichever area that is common in both the layers, that you will be getting it. Okay, that is intersection. But what about union? Union means you will be getting the entire data. You will be getting the entire area present in both layer 1 and also layer 2. Intersect means whichever area that is common in both the layers, only that you will be getting it. This is what we have discussed earlier. Here we discussed, no? This is what we have discussed. This is of type intersection. Now you have symmetrical difference. Symmetrical difference means you will not be getting the common one. Other than common one, whatever you have, that you will be getting it. And you have something called identity. So identity means you will be having two layers. One layer as input layer and other one as identity layer. In identity, what happens is whatever you have in input layer, that you will be getting it. In addition to that, in identity layer, if something is merging with input layer, that information also you will be getting it. So these are the different types of overlay methods. Don't get confused with overlay method with the types. Okay. Fine. So slivers already we discussed. So aerial interpolation is a very good application of overlay operation. Aerial interpolation means transforming the information whatever we have in the known layer to the unknown layer. That is what called as aerial interpolation. Okay, we have even solved many problems during our earlier class, so have a glance of it. So these are the other operations. And future manipulation. Okay, so future manipulation deals with future level operation. Earlier when we discussed about buffering, of course in buffering also it deals with individual futures, but if you take your overlay operation, it is purely based on the layers. Okay, layer level operations. Okay, but in future manipulation we will be manipulating the futures. Say for example here you have an operation called dissolve. When you say dissolve, if adjacent polygons are of same name, then they will be merged together. That is what called as dissolve. Okay, then you have clip operation. In clip operation, whichever you are telling as a clip layer, that area alone will be clipped. Okay, then you have something called select. Whichever objects you are just telling, whichever feature you are telling, that alone will be selected. Eliminate, whichever feature you are telling to eliminate, that will be eliminated. Okay, so you have update layer, you have erase layer. Erase, as the name says, if you want to erase certain area, then you can do it by means of erase layer. Okay, and what about split layer? If you want to split your layer, in which pattern you want to split, that you can just specify using your split layer. So whichever way you are telling, in that way it will get splitted. Okay, so based on this you may get some MCQ questions, so kindly have a glance of this. Okay, and the second category of operations. So far we discussed about the operations for the vector data. Now for raster data, what are the operations? So very simple. We have local operation, we have focal operation, we have zonal operation, and finally we have global operation. Okay, So what is my local operation? For every cell, now this is the input and this is the output. Okay, for every cell, based on the value whatever you have in this cell, based on that you will be computing the result. Okay, now in this example what they did is, you have the value in one scale. Now that value just they're just converting into another scale. Now the point what you have to take is, this conversion is purely based on the value whatever you have in that particular cell. This 18.3 is being represented as 10.37. So just a conversion. So this is what called as local operation. Why it is called local? For this particular cell, you are referring only the particular cell in the input layer. So that is why it is local operation. Okay, so reclassification is a type of local operation. Here it will be very clear. Just see here. In this input layer, if you have any value between the range 0 to 100, it will be converted as 1. If you have any value between 101 to 200, it will be converted into 2. If you have any value between 200 to 300, it will be converted into 3. Just a classification. It is also another type of local operation. Here you can just see here. Here you have 5. So it comes into the category of 0 to 100. If you have 0 to 100, what you have to change? You have to change it as 1. Here you have 184. So 184 comes under the range of 101 to 200. If you have value between 101 to 200, you want to change it as 2. Okay, so that's it. Okay, fine. So this is about local operation, and this is local operation with multiple files. Earlier we are dealing with only one raster layer, but you can also have multiple raster layers. Okay, so these are the 3 input layers and this is the output layer. Now here each cell value is computed based on the average of value what we had in the other 3 layers. Say for example, this layer, in the output layer you have 3. How you got 3? Because let us call this cell as 0th cell. Okay, so how you got 3 in the 0th cell? Because in the 0th cell of A layer you have 5, 0th layer of B you have 1, and 0th layer of C you have 3. So the average of these 3 cell is what? 3. Similarly, first cell, the average of the 3 cells is what? This. Excuse me, students. So that's it. Okay, so this is about local operation. Okay, the next comes your focal operation. Focal operation is nothing but, instead of referring to that particular cell, you will be referring the nearby cells, the neighborhood cells. Whenever you are referring the neighborhood cells, you can have different patterns. Like this, if you want to compute the value of this particular cell, you can refer the nearby cells like this, or you can refer the nearby cells like this, or you can refer the nearby cells like this, or you can refer the nearby cells. So based on the application, you can refer the nearby cells like this. Okay, either you can refer it as a rectangle or circle or annulus or wedges. So this is what referred as focal operation or neighborhood operation. Okay, and lastly your zonal operation. Zonal means the pattern which you are referring, the nearby cells you are referring. No, that nearby cells, when you refer, it will not be of a regular pattern. Okay, here it is of a regular pattern, right? But when you go for zonal, it will not be of regular pattern. Is it okay, students? And the last topic is network analysis. Whenever you have points, lines, obviously a network will be formed. Once we have a network, then definitely there will be a necessity for us to find the shortest path between one point to another point, or the shortest path covering all the points, like that. That's the reason why we are learning network analysis in our GAS. Okay, fine. So for finding the shortest path, we have Dijkstra's algorithm. So the concept of Dijkstra's algorithm is, initially you will be choosing the source node, and the shortest distance of source node will be initialized as 0, and for all other nodes it will be initialized as infinity. Now during each stage, what will be doing is, you will be exploring that node. Say for example, the initial node or the source node is 1. Now for the node 1, you will be assessing all its adjacent nodes. Assessing all adjacent nodes in the sense, assessing all the adjacent node in the sense, you will be exploring all its adjacent node. So during exploration, what you will be doing is, you will be just finding the shortest path to that adjacent node. Okay, now in this case 2 is an adjacent node of 1, right? Fine, 2. Now what will be the path of this node 2 when you go from this particular source node? 0 plus 3. 0 plus 3, 3. Already you have a distance of infinity. Now 3 is less than infinity, right? So 3 will be the shortest distance for the node 2. Similarly for node 3, what is the distance from the node 1? 0 plus 4 is equal to 4, but already computed distance is infinity. So 4 is less than infinity. So 4 will be the shortest path for the node 3. Similarly, you will be computing the shortest distance for all the nodes. So this algorithm is what referred as Dijkstra's algorithm. Okay. Fine. Finally comes traveling salesman problem. In traveling salesman problem, what we will be doing is, we have to find the shortest path from one node to all other nodes. Okay, you have to say, for example, you are starting from city 1. From city 1, you want to visit all the nodes, and you have to come back to the node 1 with short distance. So this is what called as traveling salesman problem. So actually what you have to do is, we have to find a path called Hamilton path. In your data structures, you might have discussed about this Hamilton path. Hamilton path is nothing but, you have to find a path such that you will be visiting all the vertex, and you have to come back to the original vertex. Okay, fine. Mostly you will not be getting any problems from this, just theory concepts, be clear of that. Similarly, you have another circuit called Euler's circuit. In Euler's circuit, the necessity is, you have to travel all the vertex. You have to travel all the vertex. Sorry students. In Euler's circuit, you have to travel all the edges, whereas in Hamilton circuit, you have to travel all the edges. In traveling salesman problem, you have to find the Hamilton path or the Hamilton circuit. So what does it mean? It means that you have to find a path that covers all the edges, all the points or all the cities. Okay, fine students. So I think I have revised all the topics whatever we discussed in GIS. So in 5th unit, as everyone knows, 5th unit is purely application. So if you just have a glance, definitely you can answer the question. Okay, you know that application, we have discussed application of GIS in engineering domain, application of GIS in logistic domain. Okay, so like that we just discussed application of GIS in different domains. So just to have a glance, that will be sufficient. Okay, so I just want to share a few more points. With that we can wind to this session. See, a few students have asked me to share the MCQ questions whatever I have prepared. Of course I am ready to share it, but don't rely on that MCQ questions alone. You can have it as a reference, but don't completely rely on this. What I would suggest is at least go through the presentation whatever I have used in the class. Okay, in addition to that, you can also go through the notes whichever I have shared to you people. Okay, so definitely you can get good marks because almost we have discussed every topics. Wish you all the best, students. If you have any difficulties or if you have any doubts, don't hesitate to contact me. Wish you all the best, students. Thank you.